Hi guys, so here I have a practice data set so that we can walk through exactly what you need to do to complete the project if you are selecting to conduct your analyses in Excel. And so in this practice data set, you see some information about our data. So our response represents the number of inquiries resulting from an advertisement. So here, it's referring to all of this data here. And then we have our groups as a section of the newspaper. So you see news, business, sports. So that's our three groups, news, business, and sports. And then we have the number of inquiries resulting from advertisements placed in each of these sections, representing our three groups. And so the first thing that you are asked to do is to state your null and research hypotheses. So our null hypothesis is just that there is no difference in number of inquiries between the three sections of the newspaper. And that's news, business, and sports. So our research hypothesis is that there is a significant difference in inquiries between the three sections. We would want to report the sample size for each group. In this particular data set, we have an equal sample size for all three of our groups or all three of our sections of the newspaper. And so we can see that we have 20 responses per section. So we have let's see, sample size of 20 inquiries per section with a total sample size or total number of inquiries of 60. We also want to talk a little bit more about the descriptive statistics for each of these groups, and there are several different ways that you can get basic descriptive statistics using Excel. So the first way is one that we've already talked about and kind of practiced in class. So you can type in a formula to get the mean or the average for each group. So we type in equals average, we select the data for the group, and then we select enter. You can type that for each of the three groups, or what I'm going to do is just click here in the corner and drag across for it to replicate my formula in each of the three columns. So I'm getting the average for each of the three groups or the three sections. So the average number of inquiries for news was 8.9, for business 9.1, and for sports 7. We can also get a total average across all the different sections, and we can look to see, all right, that total average, we would say equals average again, only this time I would select all of my data. And be careful not to get the averages here in row 22, but to just select the number of inquiries for each of the three groups. So I'll select all my data and I press enter. And so overall, we have an average of 8.33. Now, I also want to get my standard deviation. And so these are samples. So what we can do using Excel is get our standard deviation using this formula equals STDEV.S. So that S represents sample. If you hover over it, you can see a short description. So it's saying that it estimates a standard deviation based on a sample. And so we can select that. And again, we want to select our data. So I'm doing rows 2 through 21 in column A. And then I press enter, and so we have a standard deviation of 3.06 if we round. I'm going to drag this across as well. And I'm just going to check my formula here. Yep, exactly, and perfect. If I wanted to get, if I wanted to get my overall, my total standard deviation, I could, again, type in my formula. I want my standard deviation for sample, and then I'm going to select, again, all of the data and press enter. So the overall standard deviation is 2.65. Now, another way that I can get basic descriptive data for each of my groups is I can go up and click data and data analysis if you have the data analysis tool pack downloaded. And I want to select descriptive statistics and okay. Here the input range is asking me to select my data. So I'm going to select all of my data, including the labels here, because I'm going to click this to say the labels are in the first row. And it's saying it's going to put my output or my results for the descriptive statistics in a new worksheet. I want it to give me the summary statistics. And I'm going to click OK. All right, so it's giving me my data for each of the 3 groups. So I have news, I have my mean. So I'm going to highlight in my output the things that I want to look for. Because one of the big things about these data analyses that use various software is that it's really easy to kind of click on different things and get all of this output. What is the challenge a lot of times is looking through this and figuring out, okay, what does this mean and what are the relevant values? So here I have the mean for news, business, and sports, which should match what I got, and it seems like it does. And then we said that we also wanted the standard deviation. And so I'm going to highlight my standard deviation so I know to report that as well. What it'll also give me is a sample size for each group. So as we said, we have a sample size or an N of 20 for each group. There's also some other values if you wanted to report that may be meaningful. For instance, the median, the mode, the range, maybe the minimum or the maximum values, if you wanted to report those as well. But you definitely need to report the mean and the standard deviation and the sample size for your groups. If you notice that this just gives us the data for each of the 3 groups, we don't get the overall mean and standard deviation like we calculated with our formula. So you'd have to do that separately. You want to report that. The business section had the most number of inquiries. And so I want to italicize my M here. So I'm reporting my mean. So I'm saying with a mean of 9.1. And I also want to italicize SD, which stands for standard deviation. I want to say my standard deviation was 1.74. And then I could say followed by news. And then I would want to report the mean and standard deviation for news. And so what I'm going to do is here just paste so that I don't have to type in my italices each time. So I'm going to replace this and say 8.9 with the standard deviation of 3.06. I'm going to say, and finally, sports had the least number of inquiries. and I'm going to paste again. And let's see, I need to replace this 9.1 with 7.0 for sports with a standard deviation of 2.58. All right, so seeing that the business section had the most number of inquiries, I report the mean, followed by news, mean and standard deviation, and finally sports had the least number, and I report the mean and the standard deviation for sports. All right, and then I want to determine, okay, they have different means, but are those means significantly different? And so to determine whether these mean differences are significant, I conducted a one-way ANOVA. And so everyone is going to be conducting a one-way ANOVA because we have one response here, number of inquiries, and we have 3 different groups, right? 3 or more different groups. And so we're going to be conducting a one-way ANOVA. And so to conduct our ANOVA, again, we're going to go to data and data analysis. This time, instead of descriptive statistics, we're going to click on ANOVA single factor. And so this single factor is just how Excel is determining this, a one-way ANOVA, one-way or single factor. So again, so we have one type of response. Here are the number of inquiries. It's wanting to know input range, like it asked for before. So again, I'm going to select all of my data. And so careful just to select the data, not the means and standard deviations that I computed, but just the data. And I'm also selecting this row 1 that has my labels. So I'm saying labels are in the first row, that we want to use our p-value or alpha of 0.05, and that we want our results in a new worksheet. I'm going to click OK. All right, and so here is our output. And so as you can see, we get some of our descriptive statistics here in the output for our ANOVA. So we get the N, the sample size for each group. We also get those averages. It's reporting the variance instead of the standard deviation. If you wanted, you could take this and take the square root of each of these variances to get the standard deviation. So you could do that with a calculator or through a formula here in Excel to take the square root. So I'm just going to type equal and SQRT, and then I'm going to tell it take the square root of that and enter. And so this would be your standard deviation, right? And so I'm going to just drag this down so that I get the standard deviation for each group. So you have a number of ways that you can get your descriptive statistics. For our inferential statistics, you see that you have an ANOVA table, and there are a couple of things that you would report in APA format from this table. I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this and copy and paste it here so we can continue on with our write-up. So I said that I conducted a one-way ANOVA. Now, what I want to determine first is whether this analysis is significant. And there are a couple of things that we can look for. The first is we can look at this p-value, and this is what we're actually going to report. If this p-value is less than 0.05, that means that this analysis is significant. which means that we should reject our null hypothesis and support our research hypothesis, that there is a significant difference between the groups. So this p-value is less than 0.05, it's 0.019, and so our analysis is significant. Another thing is that you can do what we do when we calculate it by hand. So you can compare your F, this is your F calculated, to the F critical, and our F calculated is larger than our F critical. And so that tells us as well that this is significant. And so we conducted a one-way ANOVA. We found that there was a significant difference in inquiries between the 3 sections of the newspaper. And so we're saying, yes, that this is significant, and we need to follow that up with some evidence for why we're saying that it's significant. And so to do that, we are going to report our p-value. We're also going to report our f-value and our degrees of freedom. And so how we report this in APA format is we italicize our f, and so we say we are reporting an f. In parentheses, we give our degrees of freedom. So we say the degrees of freedom for this f value is 2 and 57. I actually don't want to italicize these, so I'm going to say don't italicize that, just italicize my f. I'm going to say 2 and 57, and then I report my f value, so I say equals 4.24, and then I report my p value. I'm going to italicize this p. I'm going to say our p-value equals 0.019, or you can alternatively, if you would prefer. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to have it look just like this, but you could also, let's say you had a really, really small p-value. It's like 0.0000, what have you. You can say that your p-value is less than 0.05. And so since it's less than 0.05, it's significant. So this way is more precise, but you may elect to write it like this. This is acceptable as well. All right, so we're seeing that there is a significant difference between our 3 sections of the newspaper. And so we would say that we reject the null hypothesis and support our research hypothesis. All right, excellent. Okay, there's a couple of different ways that you can go about completing this project. So you could choose the option to calculate things by hand. If you select that, I have a modified data set for you so that you don't have to worry about sample sizes of 20 per group or 60 total, which would be a little overwhelming. So you have a much smaller data set to work with since you're doing it by hand. Another way is that we could carry out all of this in Excel using just formulas. So if you have Excel, but for whatever reason you are unable to use this data analysis tool pack, so you can't have these add-ins potentially, then you could still use Excel, but just do everything through formulas. If you're interested in how to go about doing that, let me know, and I can walk you through that as well.